Hello everyone and welcome to The Information, where you'll get all the information on the latest in electronic, indie pop, and experimental music. Today's video is going to be the first in hopefully a recurring segment that I'll do at least a few times a year called Info Dump, where I will briefly give my somewhat less formal thoughts on a myriad of records that came out this past year. These are records I haven't had the time to review, but I still wanted to talk about them and give my thoughts. These records I'm going to talk about will run the gamut from bad records to great records, and to avoid predictability in this video, I'm just going to talk about them in no particular order. However, for future iterations of Info Dump, if you'd like to see me talk about all the bad records first and leave the good records for last, or vice versa, or just have me do something completely different and not do the segment at all, for instance, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to get your feedback. Overall, I mainly want to get this video up and out before the favorites of the year go up for me, my favorite songs and favorite albums of the year. Obviously, I recognize the lateness of this video, being that it's pretty much, I think, going to be New Year's Eve by the time this video comes out. But trust me, I will get my favorites of the year up. It just won't necessarily be this year when it comes out. It'll probably be sometime the first week of next year, 2019. Not to make excuses, but I've just been dealing with the flu for the past couple of weeks. I've just recently come out of that pretty much. I'm not sure if you can still kind of hear the nasally sound of my voice or not, but that, and coupled with I've also been wrapping up an internship I've been doing since about late August. So if you guys have been wondering where I and the videos have been, that'll give you a good idea. But with that being said, without further ado, here are my reviews. First up, I wanted to talk about the new 1975 record, A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships. For me, this, I think, was just some more fantastic work from the band. For those unfamiliar, the 1975 is a British synth pop, synth rock, indie rock, and just in general rock group. This is their third record, and while I feel like it doesn't quite measure up to the enjoyment that I got from their sophomore record that they released in 2016, I Like It When You Sleep, for You Are So Beautiful Yet So Unaware of It, I still feel like that even though it's just under an hour of music, it goes by surprisingly fast and covers a lot of genres and doesn't overstay its welcome. For instance, take the tight Joy Division-esque guitar riff on Give Yourself a Try, or the John Hopkins glitchy electronics on the second half of the How to Draw Petrichor track, or even the silky smooth dancehall pop of Two Time, Two Time, Two Time. And that's just the first 3 out of the 4 tracks, and the first track of the album is a 1-minute Bon Iver kind of rip-off intro. So really you're getting 4 completely different genres to kick off the record, which I think is a great sign. Sure, you can accuse the band of not settling on a sound or trying to jump from genre to genre without ever sticking to one certain sound and just kind of working with that and fixing that, but to me, I think the variety really helps the record. Like I said, it prevents it from getting too stale and prevents it from being an overlong, overstuffed listen. And another reason that the genre hopping works on this record so well is that the hooks are catchy, and the lyrics are witty, and the melodies are great and super sticky. 2 of the album highlights for me are both of the jazzier cuts on the record, including the Sincerity is Scary song, which I think is the best one on the record. And I also like the biting commentary on internet culture and oversharing, and how the internet tends to not be able to replace real human interaction on the Man Who Married a Robot song. Ultimately, my only real gripes with the record, they are very minor, but there were just a couple of dud tracks I thought in the track listing, namely the acoustic cut Be My Mistake, and also Inside Your Mind I thought wasn't that good. The former of which reads as an ill-conceived attempt at getting the audience to sympathize with Matty Healy about all the affairs and casual sex he's having. Like, sorry you're having so much sex and you feel bad about it? Weird flex, but okay. Meanwhile, the latter is just basically an extended and very trite Gone Girl sort of reference about how he wants to crack open his ex-girlfriend's skull and see what she's thinking about. And I don't think that makes for a very savory image, especially when you extend the metaphor across the entire length of the song. My only other real nitpick is that even though a lot of the songs I'm about to talk about are still very great, I enjoy them a lot, some of the songs, like the harrowing and arena rock size sound of I Always Wanna Die sometimes, and the sensual R&B stunner I Couldn't Be More in Love, I feel like they're a little too slow overall and emotionally heavy to garner as many repeated listens as some of the songs on their last album did, like The Sound or She's American, for instance. But even still, I think this is another strong batch of tunes from the band, and one of my favorite albums of the year, pretty much. I would feel comfortable giving this a decent to strong 8 for sure. Next up is the new Nothing record, Dance on the Blacktop. After the career highlight of Tired of Tomorrow, a record I enjoyed thoroughly. Nothing return here with what I believe is a generic rock sound on their third album, with just little dashes and splashes of shoegaze peppered in. The shoegaze sound in the 90s indie rock and rock sound aren't really as prevalent here as they were on Tired of Tomorrow, which is what I thought made that record so great. The vocals on this new record have also taken a turn for the worse. They're definitely much less accomplished, and they just straight up don't sound as good. And the dreamy vibes and the full heavy mix of their last record have all just disappeared basically as well. The chords overall aren't quite as memorable, and I think the mixing is pretty lazy. It's pretty bad here. The walls of guitar they sit too high in the mix. It kind of hurts the ears. Songs like Zero Day, which strangely enough was like the lead single, you can hear the guitars and just the sound in general clipping every now and then, which is a very strange decision that I'm surprised nobody caught and got rid of. And this clipping pops up again in what is my favorite, I guess, song on the record, even though it still suffers again from that clipping issue, is Blue Line Baby, the only track that I feel really truly recaptures the magic of Tired of Tomorrow. Every track besides Blue Line Baby just blends together too easily and forgettably, and they lose another point for me just because I had to look at that album cover and it's hideous. It's probably the worst album cover of the year, at least of all the records that I've listened to. So sadly, with this new Nothing record, Dance on the Blacktop, I would probably give this one a strong 4. I also wanted to talk about the Beacon record that came out this year, Gravity Pairs. This new record of theirs is also their third record, and all of which have come under the Ghostly International label, a label which I love very much. This is a Brooklyn electronic and R&B duo, and to me, their discography has just kept getting better and better since literally their debut release back in 2011, their No Body EP. Sadly, it seems here they've fallen from grace a little bit. I appreciate what they're trying to do with the sound, experiment a little bit more, incorporate more organic instrumentation like organs, and also focus more on vocals and use those as the primary element to propel some of the songs. Unfortunately, to me, this just comes down to if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The first few tracks on the record really try to give the listener a full experience of all of the new sounds and all of the new changes they've kind of made on this new record, especially on Losing My Mind, which was apparently recorded as a pretty much mostly fleshed out electronic song, and the vocalist Thomas Mullarney actually decided to kind of strip it back and keep it as a sparse piano ballad. He thought it sounded better this way. I disagree. I think Mullarney's voice is very effective. It's very moody and dusky, and it just sounds good on a lot of the more sensual and atmospheric electronic cuts that they usually make. But in the setting of a ballad where the voice, again, is kind of up front and center, and there's no real distractions or electronic drum skittering that's happening around it, it just doesn't stand out as much. Some other early tracks that don't work as well for me are the organ-centric intro Don't Go Looking and the overlong song Fields, the latter of which is rife with awkward vocal effects that just sound very cheap and just aren't executed very well. Both songs also happen to feature live drumming, which is another change. Unfortunately, the timbres of the drums don't really sound that good as well, and they don't make any of the tracks better than their usual forays into electronic drum kits. Their song The Road is also a really weird misstep in the sense that it sounds like some MIDI piano is like the lead melody in this song, and it just sucks out all of the energy and intensity that the track is trying to create. The few tracks on the record that do work for me are the mid-album cut On Ice, which even then takes a little while to get going, but after a while it does really kind of come into its own. I like the plinking lead and the buttery smooth sub bass are very nice on this track, and the early single Marion is Beacon at their lushest and most melodically intricate. Again, props to the duo for trying to experiment with their winning formula and make something different here, but it just didn't work for me personally, a lot of the production choices here. So I'd probably give this thing about a light 5. The next album I want to talk about is the Ski Mask record, Compro. A lot of people, a lot of critics, and a lot of other YouTube music reviewers have really loved this album, and I have to say that I don't think I've found the hype to be that warranted, in the sense that I don't really think it's higher than an 8, but I do believe that it is a very solid, if inconsistent, and at times overlong record. I am glad that I gave this record a chance because it does take a little while to get going. It's really about 4 songs in until, to me at least, I got the first real good song in 50 Euro to Break Boost. I love the song's Aphex Twin inspired ambient drones, constantly being pounded by heavy distorted kicks and crunchy percussion. I also like the uptempo urgency of via submids and how that contrasts nicely with the serene pads underneath. The abrasive, almost industrial synth timbres on that song and phasered electronic effects as well. They create a very hypnotic listening experience that should soundtrack goth raves and hacking scenes in movies for years to come. Generally, to summarize, I would say the sound design from track to track is consistently incredible. However, some of the tunes just aren't quite as engaging, like I said, towards the front half of the album. And I would say, if anything, the best tracks come toward the end of the record, especially the fantastic weightless vibes of Flyby VFR. They bring to mind early Melody AM era Royksop at their best. I also love the break beats and the frantic, jittery Cosmic Flush. It's a lush synthscape which pretty much contains the most effective and beautiful 2-chord progression on any song I've heard all year. My nitpicks with the record would be just basically things I've already mentioned before. Some of the songs just don't measure up to others. I feel like the beginning of the record takes a little bit to kind of kick into gear, and some of the songs I feel don't really need to be the 5+ minute runtimes that they often are. But that being said, this was definitely an album I would recommend if you like any electronic music, ambient, Aphex Twin, like I said, break beats, a little bit of jungle drum and bass, and ambient techno as well. This would be a pretty solid release. I think you'll find some tracks to enjoy on here. And I definitely found that this would probably give me about a light to decent 7 on this record. Up next was the Troye Sivan record Bloom. This, to me, it wasn't a bad pop album by any means. It certainly could have been better. The production was expectedly smooth and expensive sounding. Tracks like Plum and My, one of the early singles, are sharp pop tunes that rank among some of the best on the album. I also quite like the tender ballad of Postcard and the heartbreakingly specific lyrics, as well as the chorus and the vocal melody during it as well. I also like the song The Good Side. I felt like this really gave off strong Radiohead vibes, specifically in the vein of How to Disappear Completely, both in the acoustic strumming and the general forlorn atmosphere and chord progressions. The song also does gain points for me from kind of being written from a fresh perspective, at least in my mind. Sivan here is definitely aware that he was the one that ended up doing better after the dissolution of the relationship, so the maturity and self-awareness was a nice touch. As were the production tricks on here that I assume were incorporated by Jam City, of all people, namely the vocoder vocals on the back half of the track, as well as the apocalyptic low end that comes in to fade out the track. Where this album falters for me is the mostly tepid and unmemorable back half, as well as the myriad of TMI lyrical moments that I would find a little too personal regardless of who it was being written by. There are lines in the album opener 17 where he sings, "In the heat of the night, saw things I'd never seen," or lines, "No angel could beckon me back, and it's hotter than hell where I'm at. I am an animal with you," on the finale track Animal. Or basically you could point to the entirety of the song Bloom, which is a fine enough song in and of itself, but the lyrics are just one very thinly veiled, extended metaphor for how he opens up, both figuratively and literally, with his new partner. Much like Maddie Healy on the 1975 record, "Congratulations on all the awesome sex you're having. I don't want to hear about it." So I feel like a good entry point for this album would be the singles, if you're going to check it out. So listen to My, especially, also The Good Side, and the Ariana Grande collab Dance to This. I feel like those were probably some of the more stronger songs on the record. Overall, though, I would probably give this thing, I'd say a light 6 would be a good rating for this one. Next up, I wanted to talk about the Lewis Cole record, Time. For those unfamiliar, Lewis Cole is basically a multi-instrumentalist from LA, if I'm not mistaken. This album of his is his debut record, although it is a long time coming. He's been releasing a lot of music under the duo name Knower with Genevieve Artadi. This record has a perfect home on Brainfeeder Records, the label of Flying Lotus, the beat maker and producer. I would definitely say that if you do like Thundercat, and if you do like Flying Lotus, the former of which does actually appear on the record on the song Tunnels in the Air, then you will definitely find something to enjoy on this record, as this was one of the records that really surprised me this year. And funnily enough, it starts off kind of on the wrong foot with the overly squelchy bass and ear-assaulting staccato synth stabs of Weird Part of the Night, but it quickly redeems itself and makes a great 180 into the form of sincere, emotionally vulnerable, and just plain gorgeous ballads that are all over this album. Lewis Cole seems to clearly be inspired by Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys, which you can clearly hear on songs like the lo-fi bedroom pop backdrop of Every Time, which is also a showcase for Lewis's stunning vocal range, with his dry falsetto providing palpable emotion over top pillowy ascending synth arpeggios. The theme of emotional sincerity and vulnerability shows up again on the next track, Phone, which does dial up the funk a few notches at least, with Lewis championing a girl that seems to always be available to talk on the phone anytime he needs her to. And when Lewis isn't pouring his heart out, he is delivering the absolute funkiest tunes of the year. When You're Ugly, an early single from the record, is a fun celebration of the more homely types, to put it mildly, suggesting one cast off the haters and just do you. The vocal melodies are super catchy, the bass is super thick and funky as heck, and Lewis is later on able to perfectly marriage the funky side and the vulnerable side on the song After the Load Is Blown, which I thought was the high point of the record. I also thought the song was going to be a joke song, but it turns out it's actually a string-supported down-tempo tune about the fallout of a heartbreak and like the end of a relationship that is perhaps the best showcase on the record of Cole's talent, with expertly delivered vocal runs, strong songwriting, and beautiful orchestral arrangements, which if you haven't seen his recent YouTube videos, definitely go check out his channel. He's doing a lot of the same stuff he's doing on this record, but in live settings, which is truly amazing. He's definitely an artist that is in the midst of a creative high point, so if you want to check out this record, this is going to be Lewis Cole at his best. The things to me that bring the record down a little bit are the simplistic vocabulary, I feel, that's delivered in some of his lyrics. They kind of leave a little bit to be desired, especially on the maybe it is good, maybe it is bad chorus of the otherwise excellent and beautiful things. And as I said, also, the opener just didn't work for me at all. I thought that was kind of mixed very badly, among other things. But ultimately, the record, I think, does provide Cole with the perfect encapsulation of his talents and the versatility he has as a singer and performer, who should hopefully stop being so criminally underrated now that this album is out. I would easily give this a strong 7 to a light 8. After that, I wanted to talk about the SOPHIE record, Oil of Every Person's Uninsides, which, if anything, wins the award for clunkiest and most cumbersome album title of the year. Sadly for me, it also is one of the more disappointing records of the year, for a lot of different reasons, sadly. First and foremost, I really found that the usual sterling production and perfectionist mixing expertise of SOPHIE to be totally lacking here. I don't know if maybe I just didn't get like a good copy of the record or something, but there are just so many examples of just terrible mixing and just muddy mixing as well. Some examples are the toms at the end of the clunker opening ballad, It's Okay to Cry. They're too overbearing and they clip through the mix, and I also didn't like the perplexing and too long ambient passage Pretending. It's mixed so muddily and clips so frequently that I would have mistook it for like a random ambient demo from like a SoundCloud producer. I also was completely put off by the sharp and borderline piercing synth stabs of Whole New World. That was easily, like, I'm not gonna make a worst songs list of 2018 just because I wouldn't subject myself to it, but that song would easily be probably top 5 for sure. It's very irritating and extremely repetitive. It does not at all need to be 9 minutes long. And I know that the following complaint has kind of been beaten to death by a lot of critics and fans alike, but the middle section gets bogged down super badly. The 1, 2, 3 of Infatuation, Not Okay, and Pretending just really stops the album in its tracks. I'm not sure why SOPHIE needed to include an interlude at all, especially sandwiching it between 2 ambient tracks. The tracks that work the most for me are the early singles, like the BDSM crunching anthem Pony Boy, and the Photoshop clapback track Face Shopping. But of course, much like, again, most people have probably already mentioned, the highlight of the record easily is the jubilant pop tune Immaterial. It cheerfully celebrates gender fluidity in one of the zaniest and just plain fun tunes that SOPHIE has ever written. It begs the question for me why this album didn't have more immaterials in it. And don't get me wrong, I definitely understand the personal and thematic importance of It's Okay to Cry. It's a literal and metaphorical coming out for SOPHIE on this record. I'm super happy that SOPHIE is the person that she wants to be now, but as a song, in and of itself, it essentially amounts to musical ASMR over an undercooked instrumental. I know SOPHIE has a ton of unreleased materials, and a lot of them are verified bangers, so I'm hoping that her next album, whenever it comes out, is a much more energetic and up-tempo affair, and contains 100% more big Freedia collabs than this record did. I would have to give this one, unfortunately, a light 5. And last but not least, I wanted to mention the How to Dress Well record that came out this year called The Anteroom. This to me, unfortunately, was another largely forgettable and inscrutable electronic album that reads like a forced 180 pivot from his poorly received 2016 pop extravaganza Care. The highlights here are sparse and very fleeting among the mire. They're kind of scattered throughout. I would say overall the front half of the record is slightly better than the back half, like the glacial opener Humans Disguised as Animals / Non-Killing One. I love that song's tense build-ups, the gorgeous synthscapes, and the broadcast from the post-apocalypse kind of vibe it's giving off. The ascending layers of synth arps and bass are enveloping and almost antagonistic to a degree. Also, the minute-long Non-Killing One portion to end off the intro is chilling with its icy synthetic organ and wailing vocals from Krell. In The Anteroom, which was the lead single up to the record as well, it's actually a nice piece of atmospheric dark pop, but in the context of the record, he sandwiches it between two extremely unappealing sections that offer up dreary ambient drones in the first half and harsh feedback over top super generic techno beats in the latter half. One of the other album highlights was a very left field choice by Tom Krell to include a cover of Croatian Amore's Love Means Taking Action, complete with an original vocal melody as well. I thought it worked quite well with the minimalism and bouncing synths reflecting endlessly as birds chirp away in the background. And if you don't want to wait and hear what a mall grab remix of How to Dress Well would sound like, just listen to Non-Killing 6 / Hunger, which plants Krell's vocals squarely in a lo-fi house tune, complete with that iconic 90s tambourine shaker sound that you know when you hear it. This track doesn't fit the vibe of the rest of the record very well. It literally sounds like a remix that was added on as a bonus track or something. And Body Fat is definitely one of the weirdest points on the record, if not the weirdest point, if not only for being needlessly lo-fi and aimless in its composition, but for the truly perplexing line in the chorus, "There is so much pain and anger in your body fat." Only after you hear certain lyrics that you realize they should have never been sung because they're just so jarring and obtuse. It's definitely a song that you're never going to catch yourself singing in like the supermarket or something. The rest of this record is just too busy getting tangled up in its own sluggish pace, endless murkiness, overwrought themes of metaphysics and philosophy that I cannot even begin to pretend to comprehend. And just in general, there's just an impenetrable sound design here that really makes for a cacophonous and difficult listen from front to back. Overall, I would probably give this thing like a light to decent 4. It wasn't my least favorite record of the year, but it got pretty close, unfortunately, which is sad because I do like How to Dress Well. I love his record, What Is This Heart? I think that's the best record he's put out so far. So if you want to hear something that's kind of got that down-tempo electronic sound, but also has that pop sound that he's always striving for, I think What Is This Heart is the best jumping off point for that. But anyway, that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed what I had to say. If not, if you thought I was off the mark, or if you have some comments that you want to share, definitely let me know in the comments. Like I said, if you want me to kind of change the format of this video for the next iteration, definitely let me know on that as well. If you liked what I had to say, or if you wanted to recommend some other albums I should probably listen to before I get my end of the year lists up, definitely let me know on those. In the meantime, thank you as always for watching The Information.